at 6 o'clock. And we do have a packed program. Danielle, I've made you host, so you got now the control. And I switch to the slides. So I want to welcome everyone tonight to this absolute special session. It's all about subtropical design, and I'm very happy to be joined tonight by Jessica Hardwick Architecture, because we will dive deep into an area which stretches along the eastern coast, and there are certain smaller patterns actually also on the western side of Australia, which have similar climate conditions. We will also dive a little bit into the context to understand better subtropical climate zones and what is so unique to it, but also what solutions can be applied and what can you even apply to your existing building in terms of thinking how to optimize it and what to consider actually for future changes in climate. So yes, I welcome everyone tonight. Before we introduce everyone, I want to do a quick acknowledgement of country because it's important. So in the spirit of reconciliation, Evitat acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respect to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people today. We are here in particular to listen, learn, and build a future together. So I welcome Jessica Hardwick from Jessica Hardwick Architecture, based in Brisbane. Jessica, you will have in a minute also your space to introduce yourself. But I also want to thank Daniel, who is currently overseas, but he is our community manager and joining us tonight to organize everything, to help me also through certain tasks in the back. So if you have any questions, please feel free also to jump in to ask anything. But we have also today a special part, which is actually a little bit of an interactive session. So if anyone has actually some plans or some thoughts around what to do, how to utilize best orientation and these kind of things, feel free to reach out to Daniel. And Daniel will be also posting his contact details. You can also share some drawings, plans, or anything. And we will then get back to this part at the end of the session so that Jessica can review that a little bit. But even if no one wants maybe to share their early stage drawings or something, there will be definitely some really valuable tips and knowledge share at the end of this session. So please keep and stay with us. We have a packed program tonight. So Jessica, hand it maybe over for a few minutes, introduce yourself, and then we will dive into the topic.
Thanks, Sonia. Yes, as Sonia said, I'm Jess. I'm an architect based in Brisbane, but I work sort of from Sunshine Coast to Gold Coast, a little bit of northern New South Wales on occasion. And yeah, really just passionate about the capacity for climate responsive architecture to give occupants and building users a better life experience. So that's what drives us, and being based in the subtropics makes that a bit easier than it does for architects based down south. But it's a really exciting place to be an architect for sure.
Yeah, I think tropics hold a lot of opportunities, in particular for the design, and also at the same time, probably some of the big challenges. But even here in the southern part, I mean, we are talking a lot about energy efficiency because it is cold in winter. Nevertheless, I know exactly how the subtropical climate actually affects homes. And I know also that there can be periods during winter times which are also quite cold and uncomfortable if you don't have appropriate measures within your building performance. So we will tap a little bit on certain things, experiences. And like I said, please also feel free to share anything you particularly would be interested maybe to discuss. We will pick up on these questions during the session and then pass them on to Jessica. So let's maybe dive into the topic a little bit from the top, and then we'll work our pathway through. What I've added here is first a little bit of an understanding, actually, where is that subtropical climate zone? And while I pretty much eliminated the clear picture in the back, but it is actually stretching from the northern New South Wales up to fairly a bit, actually, to the northern Queensland area. So it's the eastern coastline from Queensland down even to the northern New South Wales part, and a little bit patchy parts on Western Australian coastline. So in terms of the climate, there is that experience of fairly warm and often hot summers with high humidity. And I think everyone in Queensland and the northern New South Wales part remembers really vividly every single wet season, but in particular when there are floods coming through. So these patterns are always there, but we will also tap into climate change and what that means actually for future. And while this session today is not about necessarily building for resilience, but it is always tied into the thoughts as well. So, and usually there's mild and warm winters, but I said that a little bit consciously. We have, for example, a place in around the Whitsundays coast, in a remote, or not remote, but in a regional area, and it can get actually quite fresh during winter times and cold during night times. And I know if you're moving just 30 kilometers inwards, all of a sudden during nighttime, it's maybe 1-2 degrees. So it is exactly these extremes the subtropical climate zone actually holds. But the subtropical climate zone has also this amazing vegetation. It's an ecosystem of rainforest, eucalyptus forests, some of the oldest forests we have, wetlands as well, with a very diverse system of fauna and flora. So it's rich in biodiversity, and really something to maybe also consider when you're planning maybe to build. How can you keep everything in a lighter footprint maybe, and not disturb that very pristine and unique ecological system. And maybe also to mention the Gondwana rainforests of Queensland, which are millions of years old, 180 millions to be precise. Very, very unique and special. So again, to think, how sometimes, we dream of these big acreages of land, and we just imagine ourselves having somewhere that house with looking into these beautiful landscapes. But just consider also sometimes that's also in itself a little bit of a disruption of that ecological system. There's maybe pathways thousands of years old of some species, traveling through and so on. So be mindful, explore that system a little bit and that land. And in particular, also consider what that land has maybe given also to previous owners as well. So it includes a little bit also that Aboriginal view on the land and the culture it carries through the stories as well. Maybe on that note, Jessica, did you grow up actually in Queensland, or what's your...
Yeah, I did. So I'm from Brisbane originally. My mother was born and grew up in North Queensland, so have some childhood memories of more tropical homes as well. And I spent a couple of years in Adelaide in between
Oh,
as a child. Yeah, yes, which was really like wildly a bit like a wild shock to the system in terms of just how cold it is, but also just the different type of heat. Um, it's really interesting to just understand the humidity that we experience here and how much that does actually shape our subtropical experience.
yes.
Having not experienced a dry heat before, I was have wild, really vivid childhood memories of really they get winds off the Simpson Desert.
Mm.
And so in summer, it's like you've opened up a fan forced oven. It's really hot, blasting air. So it couldn't have been more different to my childhood experience.
I think that's something a lot of Melburnians can relate to. So if we have heat waves, we didn't had any heat waves the last summer, but it is exactly what you described. It is basically you're stepping out of the house and it's like opening an oven and being in the middle of it, because that wind is so hot and dry as well. So is there
Mhm.
any particular area which is maybe close to your heart in terms of particular that subtropical kind of?
Um, no particular area, but in terms of subtropical homes, the space underneath
Mm.
Queenslanders is super vivid in my memories from childhood, and just that cool, um, the concrete, often breeze blocks, that deep shade, and the magical sense of that area under the house being um, kind of a place to hide away and have fun as a kid. I always think it's such an underrated, appreciated aspect of the Queenslander home.
That's such a cute actually a memory, because like we basically like when we moved to Australia and lived in the house in Queensland, it was actually our older son who was really little at that time, and he was really curious to play under the house, because this was his adventure part, because it was so hot to step outside usually. But
Yeah.
under the house, it was actually this adventure playground with a lot to learn also from our side, about all the wildlife, and to be mindful of snakes and all other things you might encounter. So yes, it is. I can really relate to that, and that's a really great way to put it.
Jessica,
Yeah.
I was
So
wondering, do you
yep.
think, sorry, I might just ask a little question.
Mhm.
I guess in terms of that space under the house, Jessica, I guess in terms of future requirements and climate resilience, do you see like that, the use space of that space changing in the future? Like, is it going to need to be more
Um,
bushfire shelters, or like, yeah, how do you kind of
Mm.
imagine the Queenslander being in, you know, down the track?
I think that the biggest challenge that most Queenslander homes, and I would include sort of post-war Queenslanders in that, which is in the type of house that I'm in, the biggest challenge we all experience in terms of the nature of our houses is they've got no useful thermal mass in them, unless you want to hang out under the house, which is lovely if you've um, got the space. But as soon as you enclose the area underneath a lot of Queenslanders, if you don't do it in a skillful way, you end up just creating a scenario, which my mum and dad's house would fall into this category, where they aren't able to get enough sun into the concrete under the house because it's all enclosed. in winter. So it's very, very cold in winter inside the house. It's much colder in the house in the middle of the day than it is outside. And likewise in summer, it's a lot hotter. So I think the big opportunity for Queenslander homes is to, yes, potentially build in under them, maybe, but to do it in a way more skillful way, and to retain heaps more footprint that's not enclosed, because that's the sweet spot. That's where it's really that lush, cool shade.
Good, yeah. Do people ever use that area for water tanks? Because that seems like quite an obvious thermal mass to put under there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. We've seen like bladder tanks go in, or it just depends on what space people have, because one of the difficulties you can have, and I know if I ever look to do anything more than what I've got under my house, it will be a tricky one. The space underneath them is often inadequate for sort of decent sized machines to get in there and actually construct anything. So it does become quite expensive. So therefore, because it's going to be expensive, people decide we're going to lift it and we're going to totally build it underneath because it'll be way better value for money. But yeah, there's certainly some untapped potential in taking a bit more of a nuanced approach, maybe not lifting as much, or if you are going to lift, looking to get a better thermal outcome, not just looking to maximize your square meters of additional space.
Yep,
Cool.
I agree. I actually, and Daniel, you mentioned the water tanks under the house. Like we have, for example, put our water tanks under the house. I know that as per, I think, new regulatory, you actually need to have, I think, 3 water tanks or something. So we fall into the 2 big ones because we don't have any town water connection. But at that point, I remember like most of the people around our area would actually utilize, for example, that space as a workshop, like an open workshop or something, which also makes sense. However, what we learned to really embrace is the quality of water we have now that it's all shaded as well. So we don't, and it's a really big difference in water quality between our cooled water tanks because they are completely in the shade. And that's the beauty of that space under the house versus having actually these plastic water tanks somewhere out in the sun baking. We wouldn't have done it probably, if we wouldn't have had the place under the house, they would be sitting in the sun as well. But I'm now actually quite thankful and grateful for moving that actually under the house because it adds a lot of quality to it. So again, something maybe to consider because I know that the water supply in Queensland is a big topic as well. Looking at climate change and what that means actually for future, we have these increasing patterns of wild weather. I mean, Queensland has experienced a lot of that, packed in the last 10 years, I would say, or maybe a little bit more, really with heaps of floodings. We had also fires across the state, and not just Queensland, also New South Wales. But in terms of the intensity here, like the projections mean basically that the average temperatures will be increasing and the amount of hot days and exposure to heat, for example, will be increasing. That has a tremendous effect also on the subtropical climate zones, which means also we will have probably more drought periods. And that extensive period of less rain can affect actually like an area which is usually subtropical heavily. It means, you know, certain riverbeds might be drying up completely. You have less moisture in the air. versus maybe periods of a lot moisture as well. But on average, these patterns will be increasing. And I think this is exactly where we should be a little bit prepared, what that means and how we can build so that we have really climate ready homes and we can utilize actually that climate rather and live with it rather than having the need, for example, for heavy energy drawing, to cool or heat a home. So I think this is a big topic. Jessica is in particular, like in at least what I've learned over the past few months through various conversations. And that's something Jessica is really passionate about. To create actually low energy solutions in the first place. So I'm really keen to hear more. Jessica, maybe on that note, have you experienced any of the typical extreme weather, climate-related weather events in Queensland?
Yeah, we haven't been directly severely impacted. We had a little bit of minor water ingress in the 2021 floods, but one of my team members, her home was badly flooded in 2021. Yeah, like very badly. So yeah, very much firsthand aware of how significant these events are when people go through them. It's easy to relate to these things as a headline when they're happening and they don't affect anybody that you know personally, or they don't affect you. But I can say, having witnessed what flood recovery looks like from a fairly proximal distance. Hey, Steph's watching. Yeah, mate, you wouldn't want to do it if you didn't have to. So we are really conscious that these things do have to be taken seriously. Flood, fire, they're not just legislative hurdles on your pathway to an unaffected house. You do have to really take them seriously. And I'm quite conscious too in terms of particularly fire. Before I lived here, I was in an apartment and I didn't have as much. It was just more airtight, fewer windows. So I wasn't really too. I didn't notice as much when there were bushfires in the air. Whereas in my old little house here, if there's a bushfire, whether my windows are open or shut, my house is full of smoke. So that's something that I am only recently really pondering quite a bit more in terms of particularly passive house. While I do think there's some, it's not necessarily affordable for everyone. Their air quality aspects of passive house are something that I think the general public should become more aware of in terms of, being able to have a better sealed home environment and maintain your air quality is really of interest to me. Because we are going to see more bushfires, for example, and in the subtropics, if you don't have enough air changes per hour, you end up with mold issues. So there's lots to understand there, and I think a really strong place for design professionals to add value well into the future for housing, for solving these housing issues.
Yes, absolutely. And we will tap also on natural air ventilation, which is a great benefit of living in subtropical climate zones. Yes, I totally agree. Then you have that moment when you actually need to close off because of bushfire, because of the smoke, and it's very irritating. We tapped in previous webinars plenty of times into these benefits, and I think there's a lot to learn how to balance actually, like the need, but also the benefits actually maybe to consider certain solutions for events like that. And it's all about having better control and ownership of your indoor air quality. It's not necessarily, you know, to just seal off everything and then you're sitting basically in just your one-off kind of air bubble. Yeah, but it's a really big I think conversation to drive, in particular in subtropical, because we are so used to embrace actually the normal temperatures, just let it all flow through in terms of the breeze. But if we are facing, and even the last fires, for example, 2019, which were along the entire East Coast and Western Australia, I mean, everywhere, pretty much, they were for prolonged periods of time. And that has a significant impact, in particular on respiratory issues, and can actually even develop into issues as well. So I think that's something, a really mindful thought actually to consider that, in particular with the lookout to future climate change and patterns in climate events. So with that, I also want to scratch a little bit. We won't be going into the depth of it, but there's a history also of subtropical design. And there is, for example, the late Gabriel Pohl, who had pioneered that segment even in the 70s with suspended kind of design to have a small impact. But of course, for example, material choices might have not been as advanced at that time compared to today's opportunities we have and we can tap into. But he did consider, for example, even back then, you know, the small footprint, but also the affordability of these homes. So a lot of these homes he conceptually designed in the 70s and 80s have that character. And they apparently also live by the very well-designed space. So when you enter that home, although it might not be huge as in terms of square meters, it has that feeling of space. And I think this is a great way to look at it. And usually he embraced a lot of the natural surrounding in his design. So, but we want to look what that means actually today. And this is why we have Jessica here tonight. And she will be taking us through 2 amazing case studies. And we will learn really even from a new build, but also how can you actually change with some settled design choices a home and make it really workable for that subtropical climate. So Jessica, I hand it over. Give us a little bit of an introduction of your practice, who is part of it, and what is the key takeaway?
The key takeaway in terms of our practice or in terms of,
Yes.
So we're small. We are a practice of 4 at the moment. Myself, I have a senior associate, Steph. I have a grad, Eliza, and we've just recently brought on Louisa, who's an amazing all-round admin and all things non-project based support. So we're a pretty small team, which is deliberate. Like, the practice is at my house. I'm downstairs now in our studio, and I like to work in this way because of the stage of life that I'm in. I've got 2 small kids, and just I think really it's for me, architecture is, you know, without being too tacky, it's more than just a job to me. It's something that I live and breathe and I'm really passionate about, but like to also try to do in a pretty balanced way. Architecture can be really all-consuming and has a bit of a bad rap for being a profession where people just can never achieve balance. So yeah, we're trying to, you know, put our money where our mouth is in terms of living in a balanced way that enables us to design homes that are sort of also then promoting that balance for others. definitely one of the really most inspiring people who's ever I've been lucky to learn from was Richard Laplastria, really remarkable Sydney architect, who he studied under Jornotson. So really like a very poetic and inspiring person. If people on the call have not encountered Richard's work, because he doesn't have a lot of it, really worth researching. He's a wonderful climate responsive place-based architect. He said to me something along the lines of, in order to be a good architect, you need to be really interested in the art of living. You know, it's not just about studying buildings as objects or sort of, you know, status symbols that are impressive to look at. It's actually about how do you live really well, and being really interested in music and food and gardening and all of the different things that build you a great life and a great life experience. That's what we're all about. So we do mostly houses. We do about sort of, I don't know, 50 to 75% houses, depending on what else we've got going on. But we're also working on a fairly decent size apartment building in Coolum Beach at the moment, 17 apartments there. Also very much inspired by that coastal lifestyle and same principles, cross ventilation, passive design, you know, high quality, more higher density, but high quality lifestyle as well. And then we also do a little bit of commercial work, but it's always stuff where people really care about what they're doing and you know, still do want to respond to site, respond to climate. Yeah.
Awesome. No, that's absolute amazing. And maybe to add, that's also the reason why Jessica is or has actually joined Evitat. Like we put a lot of like attention to the validation of these sustainability claims. We had a lot of conversations and yeah, and they joined Evitat because of all that experience and expertise in that area. So may start from energy efficiency, natural air ventilation throughout, even to material choices, orientation, design choices, and so on. So there's a lot to unpack, and it's always, of course, depending also on the place, on the site, on the specifics, and the client in the end as well, because you need someone to collaborate with you on all of this to make it work and happen. But yeah, I just wanted to mention this because this is a really great way to look into vetted professionals who really walk the talk and who do what they really intend to change. So yeah, I'm quite grateful for that. So Jessica, you have also prepared 2 cases for us tonight to walk us through. So I will hand it over a little bit to drive from your side to tell that story, what you have done, what you have encountered, and how you have overcome, in particular, certain obstacles and what solutions you have applied.
Awesome. Lovely. So yeah, I wanted to start my part of the presentation with this few little statements, which I think are helpful in framing our approach. For me, you know, you could build the most sustainable building that ever was built, but ultimately, if it doesn't respond to lifestyle and it doesn't create a beautiful existence for people that leads to it being valued, sort of, when I say valued, I don't just mean financially valued, but actually valued and beloved, then the efficiency is irrelevant, because ultimately it won't last. The building won't stay because it won't be cared for. So that's really at the core of what we're doing here. Is we're not sort of taking just a hardline efficiency focus. We're trying to really bring together what are realistically pretty complex and sometimes not necessarily opposed, but just competing priorities. So we do recognise that sustainable architecture isn't always simple. And we really try to help our clients focus on understanding their site and their budget. And that's what I'm getting at there when I'm saying what's the most beautiful life you can imagine for your family on this site in this reality. You know, we've got to deal with how much money have you got to spend? Where are you starting in terms of the house or the site? And where do you want to finish? There's just so many layers of reality to consider when you're designing a home. And then this idea around the land, the symbiotic relationship we have with our land. So, you know, the site is nourishing you, and you in turn ideally should nourish your site. And so being engaged not just in issues of orientation, but also, as you were talking about earlier, Sonia, biodiversity and understanding the larger ecosystem that we exist within, and ideally remediating our sites, even in suburbia, to ensure that they are improving, not just not worsening. Yeah. And so, yeah, this is us just thinking about what does living a great subtropical lifestyle look like for us. We think it's a house in the shade. We can feel at ease, catch a breeze, and allow the natural environment in. So that is really a very key, that last statement there about letting the natural environment in. That's such a key aspect around how tropical and subtropical architecture does differ quite significantly to the more temperate areas, because I had a great chat with someone a while ago who's really into passive house, and I think passive house is great. I'm in the process of being accredited to design passive house houses myself, but he said something along the lines of the only reason anyone would ever open a window is because it's more comfortable outside than it is inside. And I said, well, that's where you're wrong. Being in a subtropical environment means that you want to be outside. It doesn't mean you want to see outside. It means you actually want to be outside, and that closeness to nature and the well-being that it creates for people is a huge driver in subtropical architecture for us. It's really the point. And you know, if you want to live in a subtropical climate zone and design a subtropical house, it's really engaging heavily with bringing the outdoors in and living more of your life actually outside.
I can only share that sentiment. I think it's such a beauty in terms of how you can live, and sometimes it you know, while what season is also, you know, sometimes heavy to go through, but there is also something to slow down and to embrace, maybe that really tropical, sometimes even slightly moist climate, and letting actually that breeze come through and naturally actually calm the entire environment down. It's beautiful. It's very calming in a way. It's a very different experience maybe to the southern part, where you do want, you know, to make sure that you are sheltered rather from maybe the harsh winter weather or the harsh summer weather, so certain extremes. Whereas I think in a subtropical or tropical climate, you're trying more to bring that in, to combine it in some way. So it's a very interesting experience to have. So, case study. The legacy house.
Yeah, so this is a house we have under construction at the moment at the Sunshine Coast for my family. This is on our rural property near Yamundi. We're on quite a large parcel of land. It's 69 hectares, and it's a really special biodiverse landscape. So we're really engaging with Land for Wildlife in particular to ensure that we're learning about the land and how we can care for it. That custodial relationship is really important to us. So what we're designing up there is, it is a house, but we sort of think of it almost as a campsite. What we've designed is 2-bedroom home, but realistically, the living end of the house is far more generous than you would sort of expect for a 2-bedroom house. And that's because it's actually there to act as almost like a central facilities for the broader site, so that we can all be up there as an extended family and enjoy camping and really take care of our land and visit and hang out on different parts of the site. So while it's a 2-bedroom house,
a
it's
larger
about our extended
living,
family.
a larger living area basically, to bring that big family together, but not necessarily to have 8 bedrooms.
No, exactly. It's it's really likely that there will fairly regularly be, let me think, my parents, I've got a sister and a brother, and they've both got kids, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, probably 10 adults routinely, plus at least 5 kids routinely. And so it's about responding to that brief. And we're Italian, so we like to cook and we like to have long lunches and all of that too. So we're fully off grid, and we're currently sitting at 7.8 stars with our NAIDS assessment, but we're still tweaking some bits and pieces.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, great.
Yeah, so here we go talking about site. So on a large site like this, we have the opportunity to choose a site where, realistically, if you're looking at a suburban project, which most people probably are, you don't have that luxury. But what I would say, even if you're doing a new build, is to choose your site or your siting and determine your site response as slowly as you possibly can. Not to say, take a really long time and get no momentum, but really do take your time. In the case of our project, we actually initially began the design process up on the left here, the first site, which is very elevated. You can see that pictures from the left, has really amazing distant views down to the dam, but was just incredibly challenging in pretty much every possible way. It had extremely steep land, flame zone level of bushfire, cyclonic winds, and pretty difficult to access north, even though there's lots of space. If you had aligned the house to north, it would have really been quite at odds with other elements of the site response. The nighttime views one, I don't know if people can see it there, but it's a really important thing. It has come into play here at my place in suburbia just as much as it has at the farm. Spending time on your site and considering your outlook at nighttime is really important, because there are some beautiful opportunities. And so for us up here at our legacy house, it's the Milky Way. It's amazing, and it's in the opposite direction to the daytime view. So it's something that was really important to have spent time on the land at nighttime in order to have gained that insight. And also camp. If you have nothing on your site, even if you're in suburbia and you feel a bit weird doing it, camp. Spend time on the land and gain those little insights that you get by being there. It's a big thing for us when we do renos as well, actually. If people haven't lived in the house, it's much harder. I did that at my house. I renoed straight away. It was taxing because you just don't have that firsthand kind of in your bones lived experience to draw on. So conversely, our second site at the farm is just like so good. It is flat. It is north facing. It has much lower bow, slightly lower wind. it was, you know, pretty much flat, didn't require a lot of earthworks, and still has some pretty nice views. So while it was a bit sad initially to abandon those really epic views, we can take a picnic up there anytime and not have to deal with all of that difficulty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was just a little bit of info on Climate Zone 2. I feel like you've probably covered it pretty well there, Sonia. But this is a really great website that's worth looking at if people haven't already had a look at it. Your Home has really fantastic climate specific information. And so these principles that you can see here, orientating for cooling breezes and cross ventilation, using a narrow plan, providing screened and shaded outdoor areas, being mindful of the amount of glazing you use and the spec of that glazing. You'll see basically all of these principles we've been able to directly implement at the Legacy House. And I was actually just up there today, and with the solstice 2 days away, the shortest day of the year, it was just turning it on. We had so much sunshine coming so far into the plan, which we'll talk more about orientation down the line. I'll show some videos to do with that.
Yeah, awesome.
So here's what we did first on the Legacy House. This was the CAD floor plan, where we basically had a bedroom wing at one end. We entered through the middle, and we had a living wing at this end. We were able to turn that living wing to orientate it a little more north, but it was pretty challenging. The site levels are very, very steep. As you can see, we're basically tucked into the ground on the other side of the building there. And then at the highest point, I think that was about 4.5 meters out of ground. And that still actually involved quite a bit of excavation on the high side in order to achieve this outcome. So very challenging site conditions. And then all my scribbles that you can see there, that's me and the engineer trying to figure out how the hell we were going to stop it from getting sucked off the side of the hill due to its hectic wind loads. So we sort of got to this point and went, you know what, this is all just a bit too hard. But if you're ever in that position where you've maybe completed some design work and it's not quite hitting the spot, you're not on track, you're not ready to hit go on it, please don't be discouraged, because it's never completely lost effort. You're always going to learn a lot about your site, and you're also going to learn a lot about your brief through that process. So what's informing the way that this, I guess, the way these spaces are organised in terms of having a living wing and a communal wing, those principles were able to directly translate over to the new site. And if we go to the next slide, Sonia, you can see, so this is what we're actually building. You can see the way that the you guys can't see my mouse, can you?
No.
That's okay. But you've got the bedroom wing on one end and the living space at the other end.
Yeah.
We are due north up the page in our new location, and so we were able to keep it in a nice straight line, having that thin plan. When we say a thin plan, we're just meaning that we're not double or triple loading rooms sort of from north to south. By having ideally a long, thin building that faces north in the subtropics, it means that as long as you have nice overhangs on that northern edge, you're going to get really deep sun coming into those spaces and onto the masonry surface of the floor, if it is masonry. In our case, it is. That is the biggest thing you can do in the subtropics towards having an energy efficient and comfortable home. If you can face north and have some thermal mass that you protect in summer and that you really heavily expose in winter, you are doing really, really well. So we do go to length.
Yeah, you basically eliminate the need for heating or even cooling, because you can utilize the passive solar principles and
Yeah.
have.
And you can see like where we've achieved, because we have prioritized those passive principles, and that's what, for people on the call who may not know what passive design means, it's basically where you're responding to sun, specifically sun, in such a way that it is naturally or passively cooler in summer and naturally or passively warmer in winter. If you can respond to that, then you do have a lot more flexibility around the spec of materials, the spec of glass, and the additional expense you then incur in order to be energy efficient. So in our case here, we've been able to keep things pretty simple. Like we haven't done really over the top, highly complex systems of construction that are sort of, Swedish level, Swedish level kind of ceiling of the building and build-ups of lots of complexity, which has been awesome. It's kept our costs a lot more streamlined and allowed us to save some of that optional spend for, more enjoyable things than.
No, it's a big I guess this is exactly what a lot of people face when they plan and have a certain budget. I mean, it's not endless. So
Absolutely.
I think the cost aspect is a huge decision maker and driver. So two questions. One is, because you have moved actually that location, and I'm assuming that also the implied cost to the first one, although maybe a beautiful spot, but the conditions, tackling actually certain extremes, plus probably also costs, have costs played a role actually to the change in location, or was it
I mean,
entirely?
we didn't fully quantify the cost of the original of the design as it was, but it was, I would say fairly confidently, it would easily have cost us, I reckon, probably about 400,000 more to build
Oh, okay.
essentially the same house over there. So cost wasn't the only determining factor, but I guess when you've got the option of space and you've got that flexibility for where you can put the site, why would you do that to yourself? So we sort of just got to the point where it was just like, you know what, this is too hard. This is just not, it's really hard to justify. And in particular, the bushfire side of things, we would have had to go through a fairly lengthy, because the trees that surrounded that part of the site are all protected. We would have had to pull out a ton of trees, and I honestly don't think it would have made any difference practically if we had a little bit of management of those trees. Wouldn't have made any difference. We would have had to pull out tons of trees, and then it's not even a place you want to be at that point. So yeah, it was probably the bushfire requirement that was the more significant influence there in terms of.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And the second question is, so how big is actually the build in terms of square meters approximate?
Oh, I would have to check that. I'd actually have to check that, Sonia. I think it's about 100 and I think I want to say 180, but I'd have to check that, to be honest.
Okay.
It's pretty compact considering how generous it is, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, it was really of interest, because when I'm looking at it, it's actually a really nice floor plan, and it has not these typical additional spaces like ramps and I don't know how many living areas. I think that's also something, while everyone has certain expectations in their head and everything, but building just right actually for the purpose of what you want to do in that space. And you have summarized it so nicely, the gathering of the family not necessarily, you know, to split everyone off in different areas. It is actually coming together. Yeah. So
well, and also in our subtropical climate, we have the benefit of being able to be outside. So while there's only one living room, what you can't see here is there's a so immediately in front of the outdoor patio area, you can step down landscape steps to a beautiful flat platform that looks out. Then there's another sort of rambling path up from there that comes in underneath some beautiful trees, and that's a bit of a clearing. And these places within the landscape, actually, they're living rooms too. They just don't have any walls. So yeah, being able to build less and maybe invest more too in your landscape is really you know, cost effective.
yeah.
But also you know, just creates these places that draw you out of your home. You know, we don't need to be holed up inside. The whole point of going up there is to be outside in nature. So
Yep. Absolutely. So this is also that outdoor area, the seating and right?
yes, yeah, so that's that space there. In terms of how we're responding to our different orientation, so on our northern side, the really key thing is having a horizontal projection over your glasses. If you can have a horizontal projection, you're doing really well, because you get, and at the moment it's winter solstice. Look at me just nerding out over here. I'm very excited because it's winter solstice in 2 days' time. So if you want to know like what your most challenging winter sun conditions are, you're going to see them in 2 days' time. But basically, at the moment, you're seeing them already. The sun is not going to come up in the middle of the day. I always use my little trusty pen to demonstrate this, but the sun in the middle of the day in summer comes all the way up and is basically vertical over Brisbane. Whereas in winter, it's much, much lower. And so as soon as you have a horizontal projection, if you imagine this is your house, it's going to hit that projection as soon as it's in those summer months when it's at a higher angle, and that glass is never going to have the sun on it. We model all of that really accurately in our software as well. So we really do fine tune that, because you also don't want such deep shade that you can't get sun in winter. That's the other consideration, and that's why we talk about not having deep plans in the subtropics. So what we've done here, and you can see we've got in the background there, we've got that split roof. That's why we've got that, because we do have living and then kitchen in that space, and outdoor living and then dining. So we need to be able to get more sun in from up above those two front spaces. So that's how we're dealing with north. We've then got those vertical blades on the left there. They're there to deal with west. So as the sun gets later in the day and it's getting down to a lower angle, that's when you want those vertical blades. So they're also useful on the sort of pure western facade. Ideally, you want to just minimize glazing on the west. At this house, we've got the floor plan of the house itself creating some protection through that central outdoor living space for west-facing windows. But at the very end of the house, we've only got one window and it's very small. And then we've also got water tanks up against the building so that they're buffering that heat. Then in terms of the east, we're really fortunate. You can sort of see we've given some indication of the trees there to the left of that image. We've got really great protection from the east, so that enables us to have a really nice tall window that faces east without worrying too much about getting too hot in the summer in the morning. That's something to really keep in mind, that morning sun, while it's beautiful in winter, it is brutal in summer. So needing to just really understand whether or not you have a need for minimizing glass or providing additional protection in the form of screening to protect your east-facing glass is important. And then on the south, that's where we get all of our beautiful sea breezes from the southeast for us. And so on the south, that does also mean that we tend to get wind-driven rain from the south. So we want to have eaves on the south while we don't get any sun. We do often get wind-driven rain, so we do usually look to protect our south-facing windows with some roof overhangs so that we don't have to shut them as soon as it starts raining. Yeah, so
Yeah, amazing.
that's a little overview.
Well thought. Yeah. And can I just ask, so where are you in terms of the build, and like, is it completely finished, or
I wish. In my mind it's completely finished. It's amazing. No, we've got frames under construction at the moment.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we're doing quite a lot of framing at the moment. Steel is being measured this week.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So
So
watch
it's
along on our Instagram and you can see it coming together.
awesome.
Now this
Is
is
there anything else, Jessica, that got you to 7.8 stars that you kind of haven't mentioned, or kind of?
yeah, so in terms of our first principles, absolutely critical, very controlled, highly iterative, or like multiple runs of looking at our glazing. It's been very fine-tuned in terms of we've done our energy efficiency feedback probably 4 times, which is really important to just factor that into your budget, because you want to make sure that you're getting a good value for money and a good lifestyle outcome, not just purely speccing super expensive glass for a window that you can actually ultimately have open, particularly if you're off grid, you don't have aircon. So, you know, for us, it was really critical to really fine tune that. We're also using Proclimer building wrap to make sure that we're really nice and airtight in our facade. We're ventilating our facade, as in we're battening off. If our stud is here, we then have a batten and then the cladding applies onto that. So it's creating a really breathable facade that will never have issues with condensation buildup inside the structure. Our insulation has been fine-tuned in terms of oh, thanks, Steph, you legend. 170 square meters for the legacy house, everyone.
Thank you.
That's pretty close. Where was I?
The installation and
Yeah, and then the insulation, making sure that you get that right, because there is a point at which more insulation sort of doesn't create any benefit. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
And would you kind of recommend that void in the wall profile for kind of anyone thinking of building in any
Yeah, look,
subtropical
it's
zone? Is
pretty
that kind of
easy
something
to
you kind of try to build in?
incorporate. Yeah, for sure. It's very easy to incorporate. And the building wrap side of things, that's it's an element of construction that I think builders are becoming more and more interested in understanding, because condensation in buildings does create warranty issues. So of course builders are starting to be a bit more interested in it. And making sure that you're using a contractor, if your builder's not familiar with the product, using a subby who can install it properly is also critical. Yeah. And then of course thermal mass at the farm there, we by having a concrete floor and having a really well considered passive response to make sure that that concrete is heating up throughout the day in winter, so that it's allowing that stabilization of temperature into the nighttime. I keep joking to my mum, she's going to have all of the windows open if she wants to light a fire inside the house, because I think we're really not going to need any assistance keeping it comfortable in winter. And then in summer, likewise, as long as you can keep that sun off the slab throughout the day, it then radiates cool into the house throughout the day and night. So yeah.
And great. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
So you have also your family home,
Yes.
which is very special because it's a existing structure. So take us through this.
Yes, so we bought our house a couple of years ago from the family who originally constructed it, which is so special. I think it's the most special thing about our house, to be honest. The Jensen family raised 5 kids in our house, and they lived there their whole lives. So it has seen them through every stage of life, and with a much bigger family than what we've got. I also understand they had a menagerie of pets. So, you know, they lived a great life in this house, and there was a lot of them. And so that became a really important guiding principle for us. It is so easy to assume that more space will solve all of your issues when you're doing design work and construction work, but having that little reality check and that constant reminder that actually space isn't the issue was really awesome. So set a really nice tone to the project for us. So it's adaptive reuse is what we like to sort of think of our renovations as. We're adapting something that's already there. And the fact that it was essentially unaltered throughout its lifespan, to me says that they, made some pretty good choices around the design. It's a big tip that I will give people if they're looking to buy a house to renovate. Ideally, don't buy something that's had 6 or 8 renos throughout its life. It's a pretty good indication that the original house didn't respond very well to its site. And yeah, each one of those renovations will be one of the the death by 1,000 cuts that a house can experience. So for us, we were really fortunate that the house was really well maintained and pretty well as original. So we've really looked to maximise our reuse of materials within the building and really make the most of our start point. We've also, as is really typical of these post-war homes in particular, ventilation was a challenge in terms of the way that the house was originally. So focusing on passive ventilation, focusing on healthy materials for the what we then put into the house, and yeah, that compact living, understanding that you can live a great life in a compact house.
So when you're saying healthy materials, so what specific
So
criteria consider?
low VOC or volatile organic compound, that's sort of off-gassing of materials, releasing gases into your home 24/7 that actually have been proven to cause cancer and other illnesses. So looking to really keep to healthy materials, but also low energy materials, recycled materials, and locally made materials was a really high priority for us to keep our footprint low, and also just support other small Australian businesses wherever we can.
Yeah, that's amazing, because that's exactly why we have even started Evitat, because of the frustration actually, and the amount of time and effort going into finding these materials, and then asking these maybe more ethical, social questions. Are they actually manufactured here in Australia? Are they locally made? How is even the company operating? Because you're at the point of spending money anyway, and you want to make sure that that money goes to something, supporting something which has integrity, and which is, in the best case, supporting your family health, and not going against it in any way. So, and contributing actually to a comfortable, affordable place. So love that. Yeah. So
you can
We
see
had a question come
yeah.
through the Q&A that I think might be good for people. I think it's for you, Jessica. So what is more important for you, addressing embodied carbon or operational carbon in a structure, and kind of which do you find more difficult, more challenging when it comes to deadlines to finish a project?
To deadlines, as in design deadlines, or?
Yeah, I guess design deadlines, build deadlines.
So I guess for me, you can only ever make the best choices you can make within, the position that you're in. Is, we've got to be practical as homeowners and as designers, that we would love to address absolutely everything. But people aren't going to have the funds to pay us to intensively design things for the amount of time it would take to address absolutely everything. So it's different on each project, is what I would say. Really comes down to a number of factors. Budget, for example, if we're going to have more carbon intensive materials such as concrete, we want to make really sure that we're using it in a way that it's actually having the benefit. It's well and good to just put concrete in because it's a beautiful material, but if it's then also making you less efficient and less comfortable, that's very hard to justify. So I try to take a pretty practical approach. For me on my home, certainly, particularly because we're in a lightweight home, so we wanted to source things locally and minimize our carbon intensiveness in that regard. And then I guess in terms of our ongoing energy, I sort of see that as more of a the choices I make around materials in my home, I only get to make once, whereas I can continuously work towards reducing my ongoing carbon footprint. And that's something that we are constantly thinking through. What's the next thing that we're going to prioritise? For us, it's probably solar, particularly with the office here. It makes absolute sense that we would have solar. We've got great orientation, and we actually use a lot of power during the day. So I would really encourage people to sort of be engaged in these issues, but also not feel overwhelmed if you can't, readily address absolutely everything all at once.
Yeah, that's probably the most important message. So it's a journey in many ways, and even the decision what to do first. I think take your time, figure it out, what's maybe most beneficial, because there's also a growing sentiment around making these choices. For example, when we decided to install solar, and the moment it was installed and signed off, was that moment to say, it feels good. It feels not just good in the sense of knowing, you will be reducing your cost. It felt good because we were looking really at the context of future generations, being part of doing something to support that. And I think it is a conversation we can drive at every single decisions we do around these retrofits, or if we are doing, for example, a major renovation, even better. Yeah. There's an opportunity to address maybe multiple things in one go, if you can.
Yes,
But
and actually another really important thing around carbon, which I should have said before, the most sustainable house is the house that stays standing, as I said earlier. So not knocking your house down and starting again is like one of the best things you can do. So, if it means that you have less efficiency going forward, but you're so far ahead in terms of carbon by working with what you've got, if it makes sense to do so, which a lot of the time it does. You might have to do a minor demolition, which you'll see on my place. There's a little bit of demolition that was involved, but yeah.
And there are also more and more really innovative materials coming on board. Like we have, for example, like we put a lot of effort bringing on, for example, materials which are natural biomaterials, which where the ingredients are maybe from even circular economy aspect derived. So I think there's a whole lot coming into that space, but there's also materials which haven't got the broader attention yet, although they are sometimes in the market decades. So we have, for example, also a coating, like a thick paint kind of coating solution onboarded, and it's a mineral, entirely natural mineral kind of coating solution. It adds like an insulation layer, and it is quite impressive, actually, in particular for masonry, like walls and those kind of things. And it also mitigates mold, and at the same time, in the same way how, for example, clay mitigates mold, and all these kind of things you can utilize. These are really old principles, and you can make them work in building materials, and you have no nasty off-gassing actually in your air quality. So I think there's a lot you can tap into. And on that side, like what we do is also facilitating, actually making it easier to find, for example, that expertise in certain areas, like Jessica's practice and others. I think it's really important that we understand there are people out who have spent time, built up that expertise, and then you can actually collaborate with these people rather than going maybe to the next best one, who will basically say, I have no idea. They won't even say, you know, I have no idea about the material, but they won't actually use it because they're not familiar with it. And then you miss off on that opportunity, actually. So, but adaptive reuse is a great way to start when thinking of carbon and emissions. So as much as possible.
Yeah. So yeah, if we continue on with these slides, so this is what we started with at our place. A little bit of, there was a little, I think it was originally a little landing deck out the back there. And then there was also a whole bunch of concrete and retaining out the back. But you can see just little tiny windows facing south. And as you could see on the previous image, we're back onto parkland. So we've got an amazing southern aspect. It's really beautiful. But we had really no visibility to that, or very minimal visibility to that, and also very difficult to get good ventilation in the house as it was. We did have good orientation, so north to the street, south to the back, pretty easily managed eastern and western exposure. Really good roof overhangs. We love our deep eaves. They mean we just never need to shut our windows when it rains. Great hardwood frames. You know, older homes, while they might look a bit run down today, they are so solid. Like, I can't drive a nail into my frame. I physically can't manage it. It is really good quality. So I'm just like really investigating that and making sure that you're keeping the materials that are high quality in your house. We had pretty versatile room sizes. Not all post-war homes will have that. There's often pokey little rooms that are really difficult to utilize in a flexible way. We had a little bit of that, but fairly readily overcome. And our elevated position, as I said, weaknesses that we have no thermal. We have thermal mass under the house, as you said, in a workshop type form. But yeah, no useful thermal mass, very leaky floors. If we leave the light on downstairs, we can see it through the floor. So very leaky, also leaky windows, no capacity to access that south aspect, which meant we had no cross ventilation, and quite an exposed western facade and no insulation at all. So there nothing at all. So that's where we started. And then if we skip along here, this is just a little bit of an explanation. These dashed pink lines sort of highlight the areas that we have made changes. So the kitchen was in the center of the house, in between number 2 and 4 there. And there was also then a little tiny dining room, a little tiny sewing room, and then a little tiny built-in sunroom, which is very common on a house of this era. So first move we made was to get rid of the little sunroom and get rid of the sewing room. We then repurposed, if you look at the number 2 there, that was a little extension that they had done because they had too many kids to fit into the bedrooms. So that was a little bedroom, but it was a funny little room with a window from the kitchen into the bedroom and 2 doors. And so we opened that up and connected it through into the kitchen space. We then created some large openings from the center of the house out to the back, and from that room number 2 out to the side. We've then also opened up the living room in some controlled ways. It's such an easy thing to go, okay, cool, open up the whole house, just get rid of all these walls. You then have beams that aren't generally very attractive and posts that are a bit awkward. And you also have a house that sort of looks one way from the outside, but then you step inside and it feels kind of like a whole different house. So instead of doing that, what we actually did was some really small changes. Those 2 doorways are existing in the room. We knocked the door heads off and made the openings full height, which made it feel really generous. We then also this sideways arrow between the entryway and the living room. That whole wall, we kept the existing hardwood frame and just left it exposed. And then we just did the wall up to sort of, I think, 1.4 meters, so we could get our TV in there, but really open that up for breezes to be able to move through the house. Likewise, we made just little changes to the wall between the kitchen and the living. We made an opening in it, and then we also shifted the doorway across a bit just to get some more flexibility in how we could set up the furniture for the living room. And then the big change, which was sort of what shifted us from doing a relatively minor reno to a totally comprehensive reno, was moving that bathroom. So where it is there in the center of the house in the original floor plan, we pretty quickly realized it would make more sense if we moved it down the end, because it would buffer our western sun and free up some better space planning for that 3rd bedroom. So they're the moves that we did at our place. And you can see here what our floor plan now looks like. So living room is much more open and readily able to convey breezes. We've got a much bigger kitchen, which just reflects, the change in social conditions and the fact that more people are in the kitchen at the same time, and the fact that the kitchen is also not just a preparation space anymore. It's a social space and a gathering space. It's a homework space. It's a all things space. Dining is now at the end there, overlooking the park and then flowing out onto the deck. And then we've got this lovely little, just a flexible space opposite the kitchen. We have had the dining table in there previously, but now it's got a little desk there and a music area, and I can see that it's a space that will be really versatile over the life of the house, and it will evolve depending on what we've got going on in our life. And then you can also just see all of the little subtle adjustments we've made just with things like a door position. Those little moves really do have a wonderful cumulative impact in terms of being able to then fit in more built-in storage, different layouts that will facilitate flexibility. That bathroom layout you can see there, the vanity area is open, so there's no doors between the hallway and the vanity, but because of the way it's planned, it's not sort of all on show. And by separating out the storage zone, toilet, washing zone, and then vanity zone, we as a family of 4 share that bathroom really readily. I just never really saw much value in squeezing in an ensuite, and plenty of people would, in the same amount of space, squeeze a tiny ensuite in and then have a tiny main bathroom as well. But for me, I would rather have a slightly higher quality outcome and fewer bathrooms. and also less cleaning. So
Yes, big thing.
big benefits all around. Yeah, so that's a really versatile space. And, you know, yes, if we're all going to a wedding or something and we're getting ready all at the same time and we're all putting on our best outfits, it can be a little busy in that space. But realistically, the duration of that busyness is so brief. So we just didn't prioritize that kind of flexibility for a space that we don't spend much time in. And then, yeah, out the back, we've got our beautiful big deck, which has been a real game changer in terms of having that additional flexible space. Excuse me. Sorry about
That's
that. If we, I've got my project values there, enoughness. I don't know if that's a term that you guys have come across, but it's really inspiring to me. And again, inspired by the Jensen family before me. Just taking that choice to decide that I have enough, I don't need more, and to sort of take that as a guiding principle through the whole design process. Making sure that we are seeking to create a life that's really grounded in the place that we're in was really important to us. And a bit of a live slow, die old kind of mentality. We want to live a relaxed life that's nourishing and health promoting for ourselves and for our kids. And just, yeah, in recognition too of the complexities of residential design, your home is a place where you want to connect and invite people in, but you also want to retreat. It's busy and it's still. Home and work, especially for us with the office at the house, home and work coexist together here. And we want to live inside and outside. We want to accommodate young people and old people, and in a way that has dignity and is, yeah, creating a beautiful life. So we'll keep trucking.
Hi, Sonia and Jess. I'm going to have to step off. I'm getting booted out of this room. I'm sorry.
No problem. So again, looking at how we're responding to aspect, north to the street, we've basically kept as per original. South, this space here faces southwest, so you can see we've created a tall space that will bring a whole bunch of light in, but we've then incorporated this polycarbonate sheeting to make sure that we're not getting wind-driven rain. That choice actually came about because of nighttime views. We had originally planned to use fiberglass, which is what we've got on that western facade, which still lets heaps of light in. But we were standing out on the deck one night at frame stage, and we realised that we could see the outline of the canopy of the trees in the backyard. And once we had seen that, we thought, we just can't pass that up. It's too beautiful. So that's a nice example of that. We then also have this lovely long Hecker aluminium hood, which really helps that space again just be protected from rain and make the deck usable really on most days of the year, no matter if it's quite wet as well. And then on the west, you can see we've got this big fabric awning, which is just so flexible for us. And then the east we really turn our back to, because we've got a neighbouring house, which you might have noticed is pretty much right alongside us. We do get a benefit from it though, in that it's white and it reflects tons of light into our house. So we have windows to the west for breezes and light, but we don't really orientate out that way.
Yeah, awesome.
And then this is just looking at natural ventilation, just a little quick explanation of what to consider there. Basically, the critical thing with natural ventilation is to make sure it's got an entry and an exit. If you have a really large window, but one side of the house, but nothing on the other side of the room, there's no pathway for that breeze to flow. So It's relevant when you're designing your windows, but it's also relevant for homeowners to understand practically, because you have to learn to operate your house. Your house is a type of machine in some ways, and if you don't know how to turn on the machine, it's not going to work. So yeah, understanding these pathways is really important, as well as understanding your prevailing winds, which we'll talk about in the workshop part of the chat.
Exactly. Yeah. Awesome. So that's pretty much your end photo of the case of your own home.
Yeah. So you can see the openings that we're creating there that are encouraging that air to move, as well as the new windows and doors.
Yeah. What I just want maybe to do is Jess has also added actually her home in a logbook. So I will jump in and just need to quickly share my other screen. So anyone on Evitat who signs up can actually start collecting all these good decisions and start adding them in the logbook. And why this is so important is because at the moment, for example, in our property value, we have no attribution of these good decisions. And while it's now an evolving segment, and we have, for example, domain sustainability report who have tapped into that, that solar and certain renewable system solutions might add certain value. I think what we are missing actually is demonstrating across sustainability all these multitudes of benefits. And may they tap into health, may they tap into like carbon, for example, may they tap into other areas, comfort, energy, water efficiency. Again, it is very much place relevant. And then you are considering, of course, the different conditions. And for example, the home we have in Queensland is completely off-grid in terms of water supply. So water is a very critical part to it. And if I'm looking for buying a property in that area, I will be definitely looking into the water supply, into the amount of water tanks, how they are connected to the house, how they are integrated in the house, and so on. While I can figure that out a little bit through the listings, it usually doesn't get a lot of attention. And there's a whole range of other benefits which are not even mentioned because they simply don't have value to the real estate agent at the point of sale. The logbook is changing this, and where we invite everyone really to join is to contribute to it, because what we want to enable is then at any point whenever you are ready maybe to sell this, to be able actually to demonstrate these benefits in a very human-centric way, in a sustainability way. And this is exactly the example I wanted to showcase. It's really impressive, actually, how these improvements have contributed to certain areas. And we tap from material choices, healthy material choices, across from to energy efficiency, water, the comfort level, but also, for example, the integrity on material choices, the social components, and so on, and the carbon emissions. So it's a whole 360 look. And this is where we're working with everyone who joins the logbook, and really to work through these specifics, and then at the end to be able actually to attach this. And it's also a great way to look, for example, in future, like we see, for example, insurances are already putting quite an eye on your properties and the climate risk associated with it. I think it will be a great way actually to demonstrate that you have for example, mitigated certain risks, maybe in particular if you are aware what that climate zone might actually carry as well. There's also another area, I will show you that in our example, which will be released soon. It will be sitting in my documents, for example. It's like we will be starting actually releasing a module, which is a log assistant. And you can then upload, for example, order documents and other things. And it will be attributed to your home's improvement. You can then still add them or decide maybe not to add them or to add them to a different property, but it makes it easier for you. And this is exactly how we want to support and really change fundamentally how we look at the quality of homes and support all the decisions along the journey. So this is a great way, Jess, to look really at your achievements across in particular, when we're looking here at the impact meter and across these 6 categories we have established. And I had no influence on anything Jess has added here. You can also see that she has filled out a fair bit. But it taps into that sentiment, I think, to feel proud actually of all these decisions and being able also to discuss this with maybe your family members and influence future decisions. Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a really helpful framework for sure. And, for us, we haven't been able to address absolutely every single thing that we could possibly address just through the course of our renovation. So being able to have a great kind of strategic plan around what we'll tackle next and be able to see the impact that it will have is really helpful.
Exactly. And just remember, like there's also certain areas where it connects through recommendations to material categories or even to professionals. So really explore that part. There's a lot of changes also planned and on the roadmap. But having you on board, giving us feedback is really the best we can ask for, because it really creates a great collaborative ecosystem, and we can keep improving all these elements of the platform. Maybe on that note, of course we have started onboarding materials into the system. There's a lot of attention, of course, to biomaterials as well. And in general, also low carbon materials, so materials which are in comparison to standards far lower than average. And we are looking very carefully also on the health aspects of materials, making that information and that data available through a tangible, easy way to, for example, search, or filter through. But, and you can see here, for example, already these criterias, but you can dive deeper and you can also download all the specifics and specifications of the material choices. So it's a great starting point also to collaborate, for example, with your architect or with your design experts, with your builder on these choices and have some ownership as well. So I think the ideal relationship between a professional and a client is actually a very collaborative way and have some agency in these decisions as well. Because in the end, it is quite important to look it through. We hear all these stories, that ambitions and dreams were high in the beginning, but what people end up with is a complete different story. And I think having the right partners in that journey really support your vision along the way, but it's a collaborative way to work together and to allow the respect for the expertise to come in and to be a guiding principle. So we are actually, I will just go back to the slides. We do have a little special feature, and I do need to see, hang on, if we can get Daniel in, but he doesn't seem to be jumping back in. So I'm possible not actually aware at the moment if anyone has actually submitted any plans. So might be something we will maybe pass on even to you in case we do actually receive additional plans, maybe for a quick review or something, Jess.
Yeah, no
But
problem.
you wanted to provide a couple of tips for anyone who might be in that early journey, and what to consider and so on.
Yes. So do you want me to share my screen?
Yes, you
Yeah.
can. I think you can.
So I thought we'd just talk through a few useful tools. I'll just do my little screen share, mainly to help you. There you go. And Sonia, sorry, what was the result of the state that people are in question that was asked a little earlier? Can you see that?
I don't see that at the moment, so
That's
would
okay.
need to
Hopefully
go
we've got
into.
Queenslanders here, because I have
Pretty sure.
Queensland specific input, but it is, I've got other input as well. So let me just
Yep.
move this little Zoom thing out of my way. So can you see, does it say Zoom?
We
Can
are
you see that?
still on your Zoom tab, so you might, you might need to switch.
Yeah, okay, great. So I thought it would
Yeah.
be great to just look at some tools that are freely available that are actually very useful in helping people understand their site.
Yep.
So this is the Your Home website, which I was referring to earlier. Very worth looking at to be able to understand your climate zone, and then what the appropriate response is for your climate zone. So definitely recommend a good look at that. The next thing I was going to just talk people through is how to understand a sun path diagram. It is really simple once you understand it. So all you do, and there's lots of different platforms that have pretty user-friendly versions of these. Suncalc.org is a very good one, but there are also some awesome augmented reality apps you can get now, which will calibrate the sun path for the location that you're in, and then overlay that sun path with your camera. So you can actually look around and see the sun path. You can see where the sun's going to track throughout the day, which is very, very helpful to just informing your own, as I sort of said, in your bones understanding of what the sun does in your location. So I'll just show you here. So if I typed in Fairlight Park, for example, this is the suburb that our off-grid legacy house is in. You don't need to be highly specific in terms of suburb. It's really like Brisbane would be much the same as the Sunshine Coast, for example, but just your suburb is sufficient. And so what you can do is just type your suburb in. You can then set the date that you want to understand. So 21st of June, which is in general, in order to understand the full breadth of variation, you want to look at the 21st of June and the 21st of December. So that's the shortest day of the year in the winter solstice and the longest day in the year for the summer solstice. So we're set to the 21st of June. As I said, we're about to experience the shortest day of the year. And then what you can do up the top here is just basically toggle. You can drag the sun through, and it's showing you what that movement of the sun will be on that shortest day of the year, when the sun's rising, when it's setting, and at what angle. So you can really note here, and this one down the bottom, which is at a steeper angle and a longer arc. If I just change that to December, you'll see this. Whoops. No. I'll just change that to December 21. So you can see that's what that's representing, that bottom one. And then you can imagine the gradient of shift between June and December. But look at that. So in terms of where the sun comes up over the horizon, it is almost at 45 degrees south of east. Whereas in winter, it's so much further forward. So yes, the sun rises in the east, it sets in the west, but the variation is very significant. As is the vertical angle. So yeah, this is a really, really helpful tool. And in terms of just a basic exercise, being able to find a great aerial photo of your site and then print off your winter and summer sun paths and then pop them onto your site orientated correctly, because obviously where your site sits relative to north won't necessarily be straightforward. Is really, really helpful for you to be able to see where the best path forward is, even for renos. So yeah, that's a really useful tool that I would highly recommend. And sorry, I didn't mention altitude. So that's altitude there. That's what's the angle, the vertical angle. So when we compare, for example, if I make it midday, you can see on the longest day of the year at midday, the altitude is 82.73 degrees. Whereas if I change that to June, June 21st, the altitude's only 39. So it has a really, significant effect, and it's very helpful to gaining that better insight into your specific place. So that's another tool. And now Queensland Globe. So this is what I was saying about hopefully we do have a few Queenslanders on here. So what I wanted to show you was just the Queensland Globe mapping tool. It is pretty amazing what they have on offer here. I'll just turn off this layer that I've got turned on. So this is our site where we're building the legacy house. So when I zoom in here, I can look at the shade that the trees on the site are casting. There's also a really fantastic tool over here called past imagery. You can look back in time with that tool, which is really helpful because often the photos are taken at different times of year and different times of day. And so being able to look at how the shading of surrounding buildings or nearby trees is affecting your site is very helpful. But then there's also this tool, which is the Hillshade traditional layer. It's a really cool, it gives you a really cool sense of the volumetric reality of the landscape that you're sitting in. So for us, if I turn it off again for a sec, you can see where we are in relation to the coast. We're pretty close to the coast, basically straight inland from Perugian Beach, for those who are aware of the location. And with that really high wind rating, I was a bit surprised by the wind rating initially because this part of the site is relatively sheltered by quite a lot of trees. But when I turned on this Hillshade layer within Queensland Globe and I zoom back out, you can gain more of an understanding of the broader landscape that you're existing within. And so when I do that, I can see, look at this enormous drop off that is all through here. So what I'm experiencing at my place is sea breezes that are coming in. We've got Mount Ewa here, which is really spectacular, and that's that mountain you could see in those images earlier. You've basically got this relatively flat landscape where the breeze can come off the ocean, and then it's hitting this big incline, and so it's forcing it up and increasing wind speed. So, of course, we have between our elevation and our broader landscape, of course, we have pretty hectic wind on our site. And so, yeah, even in a suburban context, it can be really useful to understand how the broader landscape terrain is influencing the prevailing winds on your site, because sometimes when you obtain prevailing wind information, it may not sit quite right with you, because there may be some blockers to landscape features which either intensify, block, or otherwise vary those prevailing winds, which then brings me to prevailing winds. So the Bureau of Meteorology, I'm just going to climate data and NAMBOR I'll look up, which is my nearest. All you literally need to do is type in climate statistics for Australian locations, and I'm going to go to the NAMBOR one because that's the nearest one to my site. But there are lots of different locations that have fairly significant weather information, in particular relating to wind. So when we have a look at these, I'll just get, actually what I will type in is wind roses. So for any location in Australia, you can very readily obtain these wind roses. So what they tell you, there we go, finally got there, sorry. If I go to Brisbane, I can look at annual or monthly, morning or afternoon. So in the first instance, we'll just look at annual, and it looks at the prevailing winds. And the way that this works is it's basically showing you where the wind is coming from and how often is it coming from there, and with what intensity is it blowing. The yearly ones are not as useful because we do experience seasonal changes. So it's more useful to look at monthly. And really, I would say don't get too hung up on sort of month by month by month, but have a look at them all in order to understand what the trends are. As you can see here, that southeasterly sea breeze is a really beautiful feature of Brisbane's position. So yeah, being able to understand that prevailing wind, and then also sense check that with your terrain in order to understand more specific to your site how those winds are going to be operating is really, really helpful. And I would really encourage any homeowners to, I'll just turn off my screen share actually and come back to where you guys are. I'd really encourage you to just learn as much as you can practically about your site, because the more you understand, the more you can help shape the design response to your brief.
Yeah, that's actually amazing tools, and I can only share that as well. For example, when we built, I think we were simply lucky that we had actually someone who supported us, a really good builder company, a prefab company, who put a lot of attention to these things and natural air ventilation, like other things, shading and so on, because we probably wouldn't have known what to do. And yeah, so this is exactly a good example how expertise works. But if you are already actually diving into that topic, use these tools. They were not readily available back then, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
So we have that access now. And I think in the end, it's your home, it's your place to live in, and I think it's quite important to understand a little bit what's going on. It makes it simply better. Yeah. So we have been going far bit over time with this webinar session, but I think it was packed with absolute valuable information all around subtropical climate and how to design actually for place and for that climate. So I hope everyone has taken some valuable insights, got inspired, and really to pursue that pathway. Feel free to contact Jessica Hardwick Architecture through Evitat or directly through their website. More than happy also to pass on any inquiries coming through directly, maybe to us. Yeah, so engage, dive deep into informing yourself, learning about things, but also be assured that we are building, for example, a solution to make it a little bit easier to navigate that space and bring actually the right people together. So thank you everyone for staying so late. But I think it was worthwhile, and special thank you to you, Jessica, for everything, for sharing all that insights, information, the case studies, your personal experiences with us tonight.
My
so feel free to jump on Evitat. It is all free to use, so create an account, start exploring, start diving into that, and engage actually with great experts like Jessica. Thank you. I wish you all a great evening, and see you soon in the next webinar. Thank you all.